All right, Mars, why is this the one?
Yeah, I think this song is the thesis statement to the entire album. One of the images that's often evoked for me with this album is Martin Luther nailing the theses on the church door. For me,
Yes.
that's what Solange does with this. She
Okay.
proclaims so much. She says so much. I think it's really, it says something that three of the track titles start with the word don't. Don't touch my
Mm.
hair. Don't wish
Mm.
me well. Don't wait for me. Cranes in the Sky, it's a meditation from all of that. So, yes, she is proclaiming all of these things, but she also wants to invite you into her process.
Mm.
With the lyrical quality of Cranes in the Sky, I felt like that's when a lot of people locked into Solange and a lot of people locked into this album. She
Mhm.
was so vulnerable. She talked about the struggles that she was enduring and gives potential remedies to how to bring yourself out of those. I tried to drink it away. I tried to shop it away. I tried to sex it away,
Yeah.
all these things we can relate to. And she delivers it in a way that is inviting. I feel like that's one of the things that also comes through with this album. With some of her earlier work, it can seem like she's blasting you with a wall of sound, with all
Mm.
these cool instrumentation, all these cool takes. But with the seat at the table, she really allows you to kind of step into her world.
Mm.
And I feel like Cranes in the Sky definitely does that. It feels like you're ascending slowly versus being shot out of a cannon.
Yeah, it does feel like, I mean, even from the beginning of this album, it does feel like she sort of like eases you into this whole thing. It's not, there's not like a bold statement at the very beginning. It just sort of like creeps in a little bit, and like
Yeah.
you're like absorbed into the music or something.
It
And then
blooms.
yeah, this
Yeah.
track is the first one that sort of, it feels like it kind of shines. It's like the first sort of like, here's the first like banner I'm going to fly regarding like what this whole journey is all about.
I think it's the proper place to reach a high so that you can kind of descend a little bit, and you get these dynamics. It fits well in the overall sequencing of the record.
Yeah, and speaking of high, we can talk about her vocals. It's where she reaches some of her peaks. That head voice is at its peak on this track, and
I think she's
just
underrated as a voice, probably. That's what
yeah.
I was thinking listening to this record. And I really liked the follow-up to this one, too, from 2019, When I Get Home. That's like,
Yes.
it's very clearly the follow-up to this album. But
Mhm.
what you're saying is like there is really a clarity of her voice here that it was surprising. I remember the first time I heard it. Sometimes you just hear voices like that are just perfectly encased in whatever music production is going on for them to cut through. And hers, I really felt it shines in this.
Yeah, it's reminiscent of another time. It is uniquely her
Yes.
voice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you brought up When I Get Home, the album that followed this, because I felt like that album was more in line with who Solange is musically. Like when you look at her musical canon, a lot of the tracks on When I Get Home, they kind of go forever and ever. They kind of blend into each other. After releasing A Seat at the Table, she released a short film about the process of creating this album.
Yeah.
And you hear a lot of the rough cuts of a lot of the songs that are featured in the album. And they don't really sound like what we hear presently. A lot of them sound like what we hear in When I Get Home. The albums kind of, the songs kind of go on for a while. There's not really a clear rhythmic journey that you're kind of going on. It's just kind of just this sound that just waves over you. And I feel like with A Seat at the Table, we definitely feel the editing. We see the editing eye, which I think is a testament to her fashion icon status.
Yeah.
She uses Coco Chanel's advice to take one thing away. She uses that in this album, I feel.
I love that. Wait, so let's talk about the narrative of this. Like, is there a narrative going on here? What's the through line to A Seat at the Table in your estimation?
I think so. I think it's funny that we evoked VH1 MTV Unplugged, because I feel like this album definitely gave us that.
Yeah.
There are like 9 interludes in it, which are as many interludes as the songs.
They're beautiful.
And the interludes, they tell a story. We start out with Master P, who of course is Lil Romeo's father, who Solange got her debut with. Which is such an odd choice. Master P, he hadn't released anything for a while. So to come out with an album that heavily features Master P. It's like that was a really bold statement.
He's around, isn't he? He's just
he is around, but you get to hear about his impact and the legacy that he created, coming from nothing. The American hustle, I think, is a narrative that is really clear in this album.
Yeah.
We start off with the first interlude talking about peace. One of the godfathers of gangster rap talking about peace, talk about juxtapositions.
Yeah.
And then we hear Solange's dad talk about his experience with American integration. So to think of Solange and Beyonce as like first generation survivors of American integration, that definitely colors a lot of how I hear their music now.
Yeah.
We go along to hear from Miss Tina talking about Black Pride, and that leads us into Don't Touch My Hair. I love the lore of this album. We get to learn so much about Solange. We get to learn so much about Matthew Knowles, who was Beyonce's manager for most of her career. We get to learn about Miss Tina, who has become a meme and an icon in of herself.
She has, hasn't she? Jeez.
Yeah.
She's got a profile.
She has a profile. She has a platform.
Yeah.
And she's here to use it, folks.
She is.
She's here
I love it. I'm all for it.
And I love how supportive she is of her children and, the members of Destiny's Child. She's just, just amazing.
What does this album sound like to you in terms of influences? Because I mean, we're really skeptical of genre on this podcast, and yet we also, every time we hear a new album, try and see if we can figure out what the genre is. And like, I don't know, I was sort of thinking neo soul at one point. I was sort of thinking like there's a little bit of, there's a little maybe Erykah Badu going on in here at times. I guess I'm just wondering, like, what do you hear in terms of who her main influences are?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of Erykah Badu in here, especially when it comes to the interludes. You think of that relationship. I hear some Janelle Monáe. It's interesting that Solange was one of the opening acts for Vampire Weekend, because I hear a lot of Vampire Weekend in this.
Yeah.
Hear me out.
That's not crazy. This is not crazy.
The album Contra, I definitely hear, and Diplomat Son, I Think You're a Contra.
Yeah. Good songs.
And yes, amazing. And I hear that in the instrumentation. In her EP True, again, you hear this blast of sound, this wave of sound just rushing towards you. But with The Seat at the Table, the instruments kind of take their time. It kind of feels like they were recorded in like a chamber, in a chamber style setting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Each instrument was kind of given its time to shine, as if they were being performed like jazz. So I hear the New Orleans impact. Nina Simone is another artist that I hear a lot of.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot in the lyricism and the activism is where I hear a lot of the Nina Simone influences.
Yeah.
This came out shortly after Trayvon Martin and the Black Lives Matter movement kind of really started to make waves in the country. And I felt like this album spoke to a lot of the struggles that a lot of people were facing.
Yeah.
A lot of the kind of sound bites that went around on Black Twitter, she gave voice to, and she put to music. A Seat at the Table being one of them, Don't Touch My Hair being another one of them, FUBU For Us by Us being another. So I think that's another reason so many people resonate with this album, because she orchestrated a lot of the pains that we were feeling. But in a way that doesn't bang you over the head. You're not like, oh my gosh, what's happening?
Right.
But you really have to listen, and you're saying, oh, that is what she's saying, and that is what I'm feeling.
Yeah, like lyrically very direct, but yeah, you don't like, I mean, I think it wasn't until my third listen to this album that like it all finally connected for me. Even though I like read the titles and I was like, well, obviously she's trying to make some sort of statement about, about like the sort of presence of Black Americans and what's going on. But you are right. It just sort of, it does sort of, she finds a way to kind of sneak the message in a way.
She does. I think the
Yeah.
sequencing is really clever because there's another version of this album where she opens up with a track like Junie, which is so effervescent, so fun, so
Right.
in tune with who a lot of people know Solange to be. Just her fun personality, her fashion style, that sounds like Junie to me.
Yeah.
But she starts with Rise, this slow ascension into the album, which I think is really clever. It's like the most effective way to win an argument, to kind of lure someone in versus to come at them directly.
Well, this is so I read that she, when she was working, like kind of getting towards the end of production on this album, that she was saying to people, this is my punk album.
Yeah.
Is how this is how she looks at it. And now that we're talking about sort of the delivery of this, I think we often, in matters of social justice and sort of like accountability against repression and all that kind of stuff, we think of things in terms of violence and nonviolence, right? Like that's, I think an essential question to engage with if you're going to think about this shit,
Yeah.
And maybe there's something about this being like her nonviolent punk album or something like that. Like it might be a really effective. I'm not sure I would have been able to call any other album a nonviolent punk album, but maybe this is the one.
It is definitely giving peaceful punk.
Peaceful punk,
Again,
yeah.
we have Master P essentially narrating the album, who is, again, one of the godfathers of gangsta rap, and juxtaposed with Solange's sultry head voice, pseudo soprano. I definitely feel that. I also hear the punk influences, not so much in style, but kind of like you said, in delivery and how refined it is and how edited it seems.
Yeah.
Again, you look at the album that followed this, When I Get Home, and you definitely hear her kind of returning to herself a little bit, at least in the sense of the music that she's put out so far.
Okay, so we have talked about the album itself and kind of like how it was constructed and sort of what the pillars are.
Yeah.
These have all been very well made points, Mars, I must say. But we wanted to also know a little bit about this question that we asked you of finding a quote unquote perfect album. We're skeptical of the concept of perfection and its utility in our lives. So we wondered when we gave you that task, what were some of the standards that you were using to assess these albums by?
Yeah. Well, of course, 3 Kanye West album came to mind, and so I had to let go of those.
Yeah.
Is there a reason? The reason why?
There are just some things that you can't co-sign, and I will leave it there. But
all right, so three Kanye albums came to mind. We understandably setting those to the side. What were some of the other, or these other some kind of pillars of what makes a perfect album for you?
Yeah. So I thought about cohesion of the album. Does the album tell a story? And of course, we said with this one, we hear a clear narrative. I was also thinking about, did the artist catch lightning in a bottle? Did they do the damn thing? Does the album sound like they really put their foot in it? I don't know if you all have played like games like Grand Theft Auto or single player games where you
little bit.
You run to the extremity of what the coder has designed. Right. And for me, it's like, did the artist get to the extremity of their game, of their personal game? And I feel like Solange definitely did that with this one. I'm also looking at the artist's canon, and does the album stand out? Is it unique? Did they achieve something sonically that they hadn't done before? And does it withstand the test of time? Those were some of the things that I was thinking about. Very good question.
Any skips?
I don't think in this album. I will say, depending on where you are and what you would like the album to do for you, there can be a couple skips. If you're looking for like an easy, somber meditation, some of the more upbeat rhythmic songs you might want to, pass over. Sure. But if you're looking to turn the party up, go straight for Junie, go straight for Borderline, an ode to self-care. Dancing is the ultimate self-care.
There's something about her standing on her own that I think is also really cool. Like when I look at this album, I'm like, you can listen to this and not know that it's Beyonce's sister, not know that it is a Knowles. That to me is a mark in its favor, because obviously when we looked, everything's contextual, and we're going to look at Solange in the context of who her family is, what her experience has been. But for something to be so effectively singular, like this album is, and allow you to see her as truly as an individual artist with her own voice, independent of anything else. It's exceptional. And I think a lot of famous siblings don't quite ever manage that in the way that she has.
I think that's so astute. I think definitely early on in her career, they tried to give her the Janet Jackson treatment, in which she was the younger sibling to a successful pop group. And so they had her in television and films. She started a solo career, but I don't think that was really for her. Mm-hmm. Also worth saying, she had a child early on and spent most of her early years in like Idaho or something like that.
Yeah, Moscow, Idaho.
Yeah, that was weird.
So I definitely hear a little bit of that in the album too. Just this sparseness, just this. Yeah. But I think to speak to her sister a little bit, and thinking about the American dream of it all. This is so obscure, and please bear with me. I'm thinking about the musical Gypsy. In the musical Gypsy, it's about these two sisters and their overbearing stage parent who pushes them into the limelight. One sister, of course, is more successful, Baby June. She's the one out front high kicking. She gets all the shine. And then there's the sister off to the left. That's Gypsy Rose Lee, the more alternative sister, the sister who has a different approach. And I definitely see those sisters as Beyonce and Solange.
That's good, Mars. That's really good. You picked the right podcast to bring that one up.
Thank you. People talk about Gypsy being like this iconic musical, one of the most perfect musicals. And I think one of the reasons for that is because it speaks to the American dream or the American hustle. Yeah. This idea that a family will band together, utilize or exploit its resources and talents to go further ahead in life. Yeah. And that narrative is something that I hear clearly in the interludes in this album. We really got to hear how the Knowles family became the Knowles family. It is their VH1 Unplugged a little bit. And so the songs are in conversation with those interludes. It justifies some of the interludes. And it also is just a reflection of what it meant to grow up within that world. It's very special.
Love it.
Thanks for going on that journey.
Well, Tyler, I think it might be time. Do you think it's time for the next phase?
I think it's time for dun, dun. The deliberation phase.
Come on, sound effects.
We got a sound effect now. We got a sound effect now.
We got one. We only got one though, just one.
But we're all about evolution over here, okay?
We're in a steady growth trajectory. We got a 10-year plan, baby.
I love it.
That's what we got to work on.
By season 10, y'all are gonna have a whole soundscape. I love it.
You better believe it. It's coming. It's coming down the pipe.
Season 20.
Oh, a little earlier than that. A little bit earlier than that.
Okay.
Yeah, don't worry. It's in the works. So we are now officially in the deliberation phase. Mars, your case is super solid. I'll start. I think that what we're talking about with Solange becoming like a fully realized artist with this album, sort of it being the thesis statement of who she is at that time, and not that it's been a plateau either. I think that it's like we're almost looking at. I love that this argument was built around sort of looking at Solange non-linearly and saying like this is this person who exists in a lot of different spaces that a lot of us never access, but that also she is still fighting to be able to show up in the way that only she can, and not accepting less than that. It's an incredible thesis for an album in general. It's an incredible thesis for this person who is so rich and complex. And I think you hit so many points about why this album in particular is exceptional in her canon contextually. So I'm feeling good about this argument. Michael, what do you think?
I mean, I think first of all, Solange. Like you were prepared for this episode. You strike me, and this is our first time really talking about music, Mars, but you strike me as someone who when you enjoy an artist, you go in and you learn more about like their sort of their aura, their world, all their achievements, and that was very clear to me. You're Invocation of Nina Simone definitely gets you points here for this, because not only musically but also politically, I hadn't thought of that, and I'm like, oh yes, of course, those two put together. And the thing you were saying towards the end about like, does it? I'm not going to get the words right the way you said it, but like, do they go to the extremities of their sound or the extremities of what they're capable of? And I also hadn't thought of it that I hadn't thought of that as a standard for perfection, but also I hadn't thought of that in terms of Solange. So I feel like I came in to this conversation with lots of positive things to say, and I feel like you have expanded my album of positivity.
I also just say, let me add on to that end of that, this thing about the way that she presents it to everyone, the way that she offers it to the listener being an exceptional, like it's clear that she very purposefully chose to invite you into this album in this way, as opposed to just hitting it with like a pop banger to start. I think that was a really well made. It's strategic. The strategy behind it, the limit pushing, the
strategery,
if you will.
Yeah. Well,
so you doing it? You giving it to me?
I mean, Tyler, what do you say? I mean, I think I'm good, but I mean, do you, like, you've heard Mars's case?
I have.
You've listened very closely to what they've had to say and what they've had to share with us, and you've listened to the album this week.
I have.
So, Tyler, what do you think? Does Solange's A Seat at the Table go to 11? Is it a perfect album? Can it join the Pantheon?
You're goddamn right it can. That'll be like...
This is where we need another sound effect, Mars.
It's coming.
Right, it's like, this is...
Hey, we love Foley. Let's bring it back.
I need to have like little fake potato shoes right here, so I can be like walking out of the...
just get your slippers. They're multi-purposeful.
Right. So slippers are perfectly fine. Holy shit, that was great, Mars. Thank you for bringing this album to us.
Thank
what
you
a
all.
God.
ChatGPT helped me with this case, so thank you.
Yes, good.
Thanks, AI. Don't forget, that's Mars Wolf.
We'll use a little AI as a treat. That's what we'll do. Mars, we know that you are up to all sorts of fantastic things, and your creativity, your creative spirit never stops shining in my mind. So would you have anything that you wanted to share with our listeners? Anything you want to shout out, either that you're working on or that you love?
Yes. Well, inspired by Solange herself, she recently had a stint with the New York City Ballet, and she scored one of their most recent ballets. I am going to do the same. This summer, I'm working on scoring a ballet. It'll be a filmed project, so it's accessible to multiple folks. Yes. And we'll be seeing some little whispers of that this summer. Yes. And then in the fall, something will be released on my digital platform. Yeah.
Amazing.
So yes.
Amazing. And your your digital platform, like what's
just my website, marswolf.com.
marswolf.com. Okay, we'll link to it. I like that you're calling it your digital platform though too. That's kind of that's another thing that's coming. People, a website for us. So thinking about how to use those spaces in a creative way is something I'm very interested in. Excited to see what you got up there.
We can also take a page from Solange's book. She has a digital platform, Saint Heron, which is an extension of Black Planet.
We should share that one too. That sounds like a good one to share.
We love the internet. See, again, Mars Wolf.
Write it down, AI.
I got you. Do you got me?
Well, dear listeners, you should check out those links that we've hopefully remembered to put in the bio or in the episode description. But also, if you have not listened to the entirety of Solange's A Seat at the Table, what are you doing? Like, you should just do that right now. As soon as this episode is done, just like put it in your queue on Spotify or Apple, whatever you're doing. Like, queue that up. And also, don't forget to follow us on all the social medias if you haven't done that already. Maybe we'll have some fun things on there. And, leading up to our 100th episode coming up soon.
Coming up quick.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you all so much for listening. Tyler,